I raised her for 10 years, spent $120,000 on her future. Then she told me I wasn't worth calling dad. So I smiled, canceled everything, and walked away. But when cancer hit my family and my ex-wife came back for revenge, she returned with secrets that changed everything. My name's Marcus Thompson, but everyone calls me Mark. I'm 50 years old, and I've been running Thompson's Classic Auto for the past 15 years here in Cedar Falls, Iowa. It's a good business, restoring vintage Mustangs, Camaros, the kind of cars that make grown men weep when they see them purring like kittens again. I've got steady customers, guys who trust me with their babies, and that means something in this business. But this story isn't about cars. It's about family, and how sometimes the people you take a bullet for are the same ones who'll put that bullet in the chamber. I met Linda Garrett at a community barbecue 7 years ago. She was this gorgeous redhead with a laugh that could light up a room, standing by the dessert table, looking a little lost. Her daughter Britney was 10 then, shy as a church mouse, hiding behind her mama's legs. Linda had been through hell with Britney's biological father, some deadbeat who decided fatherhood wasn't for him when the going got tough. When Linda told me about her situation that first night, sitting on my porch drinking sweet tea, I didn't see baggage. I saw a woman who'd fought tooth and nail to give her kid a good life. I saw a little girl who needed someone to show her that not all men run when things get complicated. I made a choice that night. If I was going to love Linda, I was going to love Britney too. All in, no half measures. That's how I do everything. My business, my relationships, my life. You either commit or you walk away. 3 years later, we tied the knot. Britney was my daughter from day one. Legally adopted her, gave her my last name, the whole 9 yards. 2 years after that, Linda and I had Emma together. But I made damn sure Britney never felt like the outsider. Both girls got the same bedtime stories, the same birthday parties, the same college funds I started the minute they became mine. For years, it worked. Britney would run to the garage after school, wanting to help me with whatever classic car I was working on. She'd hand me tools, ask a million questions, call me dad like it was the most natural thing in the world. Those were good years. The best years. But somewhere around her 16th birthday, something shifted. The first problem in our foundation showed up when Britney turned 17. I should have seen it coming, but when you're busy running a business and raising 2 kids, some things get overlooked. It started with small things. She'd roll her eyes when I asked about her day. When I'd offer help with homework, she'd say she had it handled. When I suggested she might want to learn more about the automotive business, maybe take over Thompson's Classic Auto someday, she looked at me like I'd suggested she start mud wrestling. But the real wake-up call came on her birthday. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect gift. Britney had been driving my old pickup to school, complaining it was embarrassing. So I found her a beautiful 1995 Ford Mustang convertible. Not just any Mustang. This was a GT with a 5.0 V8, cherry red with black interior. I'd spent 3 months restoring it myself, working nights after the shop closed. The morning of her birthday, I led her outside with her eyes closed. When she opened them and saw that Mustang sitting in our driveway, gleaming in the Iowa sunshine, I expected tears of joy. Instead, I got the coldest stare I'd ever seen from my daughter. "This is it," Britney said, walking around the car like it was roadkill. "It's a classic," I told her, trying to keep the pride in my voice. I restored every inch of it myself. New engine, new transmission, new paint job. "Dad," she said, and the way she said it made my stomach drop. "My friend Jessica got a brand new BMW for her birthday. This looks like something from a junkyard." Linda stepped up beside me, putting her hand on my arm. "Britney, your father worked incredibly hard on this car. It's beautiful." But Britney wasn't listening to her mother. She was staring at me with something that looked dangerously close to disappointment. "Can I get a real car instead?" she asked. That night, after Britney had gone to bed without so much as a thank you, Linda found me in the garage, sitting on my workbench with a beer in my hand. "She's just being a teenager," Linda said. "You know how kids are at this age." But I wasn't convinced. Something had changed in my daughter, and I had the sinking feeling it wasn't just hormones. A week later, I found out what was really going on. Sandra Martinez, one of my regular customers, mentioned she'd seen Britney at the Dairy Queen with some man she didn't recognize. Older guy, maybe 40, driving a nice car. When I confronted Britney about it, she looked at me like I was invading her privacy. "That was my dad," she said simply. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I'm your dad, Britney. She shook her head. My real dad, Mark. He's been calling me. Finding out that Britney's biological father was back in the picture felt like someone had ripped the engine out of a perfectly good car. All those years of being her dad, and suddenly I was just the guy who happened to be married to her mother. I confronted Linda about it that same night. She was folding laundry in our bedroom, moving slowly like she was trying to buy time. How long has this been going on? I asked. Linda didn't look up from the clothes. About 3 months. He reached out through Facebook. 3 months. The words came out harder than I intended. And you didn't think to tell me? Mark, please keep your voice down. Emma's sleeping. I sat on the edge of our bed, trying to process this. What does he want? He says he's changed. Got his life together. Wants to build a relationship with Britney. Linda finally looked at me, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. He's remarried now, has a steady job managing a car dealership in Des Moines. A car dealership. Of course. That explained Britney's sudden dissatisfaction with everything I did. And you think this is a good idea? I asked. Linda sat down beside me. I don't know what to think. But she's almost 18, Mark. I can't stop her from talking to her biological father. Over the next few weeks, I watched my daughter slip away piece by piece. She started spending weekends in Des Moines with him. When she came back, she'd have new clothes, expensive jewelry, stories about fancy restaurants I could never afford on a mechanic's salary. The worst part wasn't the gifts. It was the way she looked at me afterward, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time and didn't like what she found. One evening, I was working late in the garage when Britney came home from another weekend with her father. She walked through the shop, stepping carefully around the oil stains in her new white sneakers. Mark, she said. Not Dad. Mark, how was your weekend? I asked, not looking up from the carburetor I was rebuilding. Good. Dad's teaching me about business. Real business, not just fixing old cars. That stung, but I kept my voice level. There's nothing wrong with honest work, Britney. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he wants me to come live with him and Janet. Says I could finish high school there, maybe work at the dealership part-time. My hand stopped moving. What did you tell him? I told him I'd think about it. I finally looked at her then. My little girl who used to hand me wrenches and ask about every bolt and gasket. Now she was looking at me like I was a stranger. Is that what you want? I asked. She shrugged. Maybe it's time I got to know my real father. That word, real, hit me like a punch to the gut. But I just nodded and went back to my work. The breaking point came in December, right before Christmas. I've been planning something special for months, a family trip to Colorado to go skiing. It would be tight financially, but I've been setting money aside, wanting to give the girls memories they'd never forget. I announced it over dinner on a Tuesday night, proud as hell of myself for pulling it together. A ski trip. Emma squealed, bouncing in her chair. Really, Dad? But Britney just picked at her meatloaf. I can't go. Why not? Linda asked. I'm spending Christmas with Dad and Janet. They're taking me to Vail. Of course they were. Vail, not some budget ski lodge in Colorado Springs like I had planned. You could do both, I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. We could go the week after Christmas. Britney looked at me like I'd suggested we vacation in a dumpster. Dad already bought the plane tickets. Besides, Vail has way better slopes. That night, I called the ski lodge and canceled our reservations. Lost the deposit, but it didn't matter anymore. Christmas morning was a disaster waiting to happen. I could feel it in the air like the tension before a thunderstorm. Emma was excited about her presents, but Britney sat on the couch looking bored, checking her phone every 5 minutes. I'd bought her a vintage leather jacket I'd seen her admiring at an antique shop. It had cost me more than I wanted to spend, but I thought she'd appreciate something with character, something with history. When she unwrapped it, she held it up like it was covered in grease. It's used, she said. It's vintage, I corrected. The woman at the shop said it's from the 1970s. Authentic leather, still in perfect condition. Britney looked at her mother, then back at me. Dad bought me a new leather jacket from Nordstrom. Real leather, not some old thing from a thrift store. The room went quiet except for the sound of Emma playing with her new dollhouse. Linda was staring at her hands, and I felt like I was watching my family fall apart in slow motion. That's when Linda's sister, Karen, chose the worst possible moment to try to lighten the mood. Well, Karen said with a bright smile, these girls sure are lucky to have such a generous dad. Britney let out a short, bitter laugh. Some people don't deserve to be called dad. The words hung in the air like smoke from an engine fire. Emma stopped playing with her dollhouse. Linda's face went white. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like they weighed 1,000 pounds each. I walked over to the Christmas tree, picked up the leather jacket, and tucked it under my arm. Then I looked at Britney, really looked at her, and said calmly, "Don't touch any of the other gifts I bought you, including that Mustang sitting in the driveway." I headed toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "And that college fund I've been building for you, consider it canceled." Then I walked out of my own house on Christmas morning, leaving behind the sound of stunned silence and my wife calling my name. After that Christmas disaster, I spent the rest of the week in my shop, working on anything that would keep my hands busy and my mind off what had just happened. Linda tried talking to me a few times, but I wasn't ready. Emma kept asking where Britney was. Apparently, she packed her bags and left for Des Moines that same afternoon. 3 days after Christmas, Linda found me rebuilding the transmission on a 1967 Camaro SS. I was covered in grease up to my elbows, which was exactly how I wanted it. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway between the house and garage. I didn't look up from my work. "What's there to talk about?" "Your daughter made her choice pretty clear." "She's your daughter too," Linda said quietly. That made me stop. I set down my wrench and finally looked at her. "Is she?" "Because apparently I'm not worth calling Dad." Linda stepped into the garage, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "She's 17, Mark. She's confused, angry, making stupid decisions. That doesn't erase everything you've done for her, doesn't it?" I asked. 10 years, Linda. 10 years of being her father, and it all meant nothing the second her real dad showed up with a bigger wallet. Linda was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "I should have stopped this months ago. I should have told Derek to stay away." "Why didn't you?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I was scared. Scared that if I tried to keep them apart, Britney would blame me forever. I thought maybe if I let her see him for who he really is." "And who is he really?" I asked. Linda's laugh was bitter. "The same irresponsible man who walked away from his pregnant girlfriend 20 years ago. He's got money now, sure, but he's still the same person. Self-centered, unreliable, always looking for the easy way out." I turned back to the transmission. Well, now she gets to learn that lesson firsthand. "Mark, please. She'll come around. I know she will." But I wasn't so sure. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted her to anymore. 2 weeks later, I got a call that changed everything. It was Linda's voice, shaky and scared in a way I'd never heard before. "Mark, you need to come to the hospital. Emma's sick." I dropped everything and raced to Iowa Methodist Medical Center, my heart pounding the entire drive. When I got there, Linda was in the waiting room, her face pale and streaked with tears. "What happened?" I asked, pulling her into my arms. "She collapsed at school," Linda sobbed. "They think it might be leukemia." The word hit me like a freight train. Emma, my little girl, only 9 years old, might have cancer. Over the next few hours, we met with doctors, underwent tests, heard words like blood work and bone marrow biopsy that no parent ever wants to hear. The preliminary diagnosis was acute lymphoblastic leukemia, but they needed more tests to be sure. "The good news," Dr. Patterson explained, "is that if it is all, it's highly treatable in children. The survival rate is over 90% with proper treatment." "And the bad news?" I asked. "Treatment is expensive, very expensive. Even with insurance, you're looking at significant out-of-pocket costs." Linda and I exchanged glances. We had some savings, but not enough for cancer treatment. That night, sitting in Emma's hospital room while she slept, I made the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, I called my bank and liquidated Emma's college fund without hesitation. Then I did something that felt like tearing my own heart out. I transferred every penny from Britney's fund too. My little girl needed treatment, and I'd be damned if money would stand in the way. Emma's treatment started immediately. Chemotherapy, radiation, countless hospital visits that blurred together into a nightmare of medical bills and insurance claims. Linda quit her part-time job at the library to stay with Emma full-time. I kept the shop running, but barely. Most of my regular customers understood when I had to reschedule appointments or work late into the night to catch up. Through it all, Britney was nowhere to be found. Linda had called her the night Emma was diagnosed, but Britney said she couldn't leave Des Moines right away. Then it was school commitments, then plans with Derek that couldn't be changed. 3 weeks into Emma's treatment, I was at the hospital when an unexpected visitor showed up. I was reading to Emma in her room when I heard a familiar voice in the hallway. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Emma Thompson's room." It was Britney. She looked different, older somehow, wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Expensive clothes. Emma's face lit up when she saw her sister. "Britney, you came." Britney hugged Emma carefully, mindful of all the tubes and wires. "Of course I came, little sis. How are you feeling?" For a few minutes, it was almost like old times. Britney made Emma laugh, helped her with a puzzle, acted like the big sister I remembered. But then she looked at me, and that coldness crept back in her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. Outside, in the hallway, Britney crossed her arms and stared at me like I was a stranger. "Mom told me you canceled my college fund." "I did," I said simply. "That money was mine. That money was mine to give or not give. I chose to give it to your sister instead." Britney's face flushed red. "You can't do that. It's not fair." "Fair." The word came out harder than I intended. "You want to talk about fair? Your sister is fighting for her life, and you're worried about college money." "That's not what I meant," Britney said, but her voice lacked conviction. "What did you mean then?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Derek says you're just trying to manipulate me, using Emma's illness to get back at me." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Derek says a lot of things, doesn't he?" "He's right, though. You're punishing me because I chose him over you." I looked at this young woman who used to be my daughter, and I felt tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired. "Britney," I said quietly, "I'm not punishing you. I'm saving my daughter's life with money I worked for and saved. If you can't understand the difference, then Derek's taught you well." I turned to go back into Emma's room, then stopped. "If you want to be here for Emma, you're welcome. If you're here to argue about money while your sister fights cancer, then you can leave." Britney stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the elevator without another word. Through the window, I watched Emma playing with her dolls, bald head covered by a bright pink hat Linda had bought her. My brave little girl who never complained, never asked why this was happening to her. Emma's treatment was going well, but the stress was eating our family alive. I was working 16-hour days to keep up with the medical bills. Linda was exhausted from constant hospital visits, and the silence from Britney felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. Then, 3 months after Emma's diagnosis, my past came knocking on my door in the worst possible way. I was in the garage, working on a customer's 1969 Mustang Boss 429, when I heard the sound of expensive heels clicking across my concrete floor. I looked up to see a woman I hadn't seen in 15 years, my ex-wife, Rebecca. She looked exactly like I remembered, if you added designer clothes and a lawyer's confidence. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her smile sharp as a knife. "Hello, Mark," she said, like we'd seen each other last week instead of a decade and a half ago. "Rebecca." I set down my wrench, wiping my hands on a rag. "What do you want?" "I heard about your stepdaughter's situation. Very sad." Her tone suggested she found it anything but sad. "I also heard you've been liquidating assets." My blood ran cold. "How do you know about that?" "I have my sources." "The point is, Mark, you've been making financial decisions that affect my interests." "Your interests?" Rebecca pulled out a folder thick with legal documents. "When we divorced, you kept the shop and the house. But according to our settlement agreement, I'm entitled to half of any significant assets you acquire or liquidate during the first 20 years post-divorce." I stared at her, feeling like she just sucker punched me. "That was 15 years ago, Rebecca. You walked away. I walked away from you. Not from what was rightfully mine. Those college funds. Half of that money is mine according to our divorce decree." "You're insane. That money is gone. It paid for my daughter's cancer treatment." "Your stepdaughter," Rebecca corrected. "And my lawyer disagrees with your assessment of our agreement." I wanted to throw her out bodily, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What do you want?" $50,000. Cash. Or I'll file a lien against your shop and force a sale to recover my portion of the liquidated assets. The number hit me like a sledgehammer. $50,000 I didn't have, couldn't borrow, and couldn't earn fast enough to matter. "I don't have that kind of money," I said. Rebecca's smile turned predatory. "Then I guess you better find it. You have 30 days. She left her business card on my workbench and clicked her way back to her BMW. leaving me standing there wondering how my life had become such a complete disaster. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills, trying to figure out how to pull $50,000 out of thin air. The shop was mortgaged to the hilt. The house had a second mortgage from Emma's treatment costs. My credit cards were maxed out. Linda found me there at 2 in the morning, head in my hands. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting down beside me. I told her about Rebecca's visit, watching her face go pale as I explained our situation. "Can she really do that?" Linda asked. "Her lawyer seems to think so. And even if she can't, fighting it in court will cost money we don't have." Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that broke my heart. "Maybe we should call Brittany's grandfather." I'd heard about Brittany's paternal grandfather, Harold, but never met him. He was some kind of real estate mogul from Chicago, owned apartment complexes and shopping centers across the Midwest. According to Linda, he'd reached out after Britney reconnected with her father, wanting to meet his granddaughter. "He's got money, Mark," Linda said gently. "Real money. And he's been asking about meeting Emma too." The idea of asking Harold for help made my stomach turn. But with Rebecca's threat hanging over us and Emma still needing treatment, I was running out of options. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at Harold's hotel suite in downtown Des Moines. I drove there feeling like I was about to sell my soul to the devil. Harold Patterson was exactly what I'd expected, silver-haired, expensively dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Britney was there too, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Thompson," Harold said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "I've heard so much about you." I bet he had. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I said, keeping my voice level. Harold gestured to a chair. "Britney tells me you're having some financial difficulties. Medical bills, legal troubles." I glanced at Britney, wondering what exactly she'd told him. "Emma's treatment has been expensive, and now my ex-wife is making claims on money that doesn't exist anymore." $50,000, Harold said. It wasn't a question. "You seem well-informed." Harold smiled. "I make it my business to know about family matters, especially when they involve my granddaughter's well-being." "Emma isn't your granddaughter," I said quietly. "No, but Britney is. And Britney cares about Emma, even if she's been too proud to show it lately." Britney shifted in her chair, but didn't speak. Harold leaned forward. "I'm prepared to help you, Mr. Thompson. I'll pay off your ex-wife, cover the remaining medical expenses, even throw in enough extra to keep your shop running smoothly." Here it comes, I thought. What's the catch? No catch. Just a simple request. Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'd like Britney to come live with me in Chicago. Finish high school at a private academy. Spend summers learning the family business." I felt the trap closing around me. "And if I say no, then you find your own way out of this mess." I looked at Britney, really looked at her. She was staring at her hands, but I could see the conflict in her face. "What do you want, Britney?" I asked. She finally looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to hand me wrenches and ask about every bolt and gasket. "I want Emma to get better," she said quietly. "And I want you to not lose everything because of me. This isn't because of you. Isn't it?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "If I hadn't been so awful, if I hadn't pushed you away, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation." Harold cleared his throat. "The offer stands, Mr. Thompson. Brittany's future for your family's financial security." I sat there for a long moment, weighing my options. Take Harold's money and lose Britney forever, or refuse and possibly lose everything else. Finally, I stood up. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Harold, but my daughter isn't for sale." Harold's eyebrows rose. "Even if it means losing your business? You're home. Even then." I headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at Britney. "You're always welcome home. Both of you know that." Then I walked out, leaving behind $250,000 and the shocked silence of a man who wasn't used to hearing no. 2 weeks after I walked away from Harold's money, everything started falling apart at once. Rebecca's lawyer filed a lien against my shop. The bank started foreclosure proceedings on our house. I was 3 months behind on Emma's medical payments, and the collection calls were relentless. But sometimes life throws you a curveball when you least expect it. I was working late in the garage, trying to finish a restoration that would cover this month's power bill, when Britney showed up. Not in Harold's chauffeur-driven car, but in a beat-up Honda Civic with Iowa plates. "That's my car," I said, recognizing the silver Civic I'd bought her for her 17th birthday. "I drove it back from Chicago," she said quietly. "Took me 12 hours. She looked different. Tired. Older, like she'd been through something that aged her beyond her 18 years. "Harold let you leave?" Britney laughed, but there was no humor in it. Harold didn't have a choice. I had some news that changed his perspective on having me as a granddaughter. She sat down on my workbench, the same spot she used to sit when she was little and wanted to help with repairs. "I'm pregnant, Mark." The words hit me like a wrench to the gut. "How far along?" "For months. The baby's father is some guy from Des Moines I met through Derek. Real winner. Took off the minute I told him." I set down my tools and really looked at her. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Harold kicked me out when he found out. Said he wasn't going to support trailer trash behavior in his family. Derek suddenly decided he was too busy to deal with my drama." "And your biological father?" Derek made it clear that unwed mothers don't fit his successful businessman image. I felt something shift inside me, like an engine finally clicking into gear after months of grinding. "What do you need?" I asked. Brittany's eyes filled with tears. "I need my dad." The word hit me harder than any insult she'd ever thrown at me. After everything, the comparisons, the rejection, the money I'd lost trying to save our family, she still needed me. "I'm here," I said simply. That night, Linda cried when Britney told her about the pregnancy. Not tears of disappointment, but relief that our daughter was finally home. "We'll figure it out," Linda said, holding Britney like she was 10 years old again. "Families figure things out." 3 days later, Harold's lawyer called. Apparently, Harold was reconsidering his position. With Britney pregnant and Derek washing his hands of the situation, Harold realized his granddaughter needed family support. He offered to pay off Rebecca, cover Emma's medical bills, and set up a trust fund for the baby. No strings attached this time. "Why?" I asked his lawyer. "Because Mr. Patterson finally understands what you knew all along. Family isn't about money. It's about showing up when people need you most." 6 months later, I was installing a new carburetor in a 1970 Plymouth Cuda when I heard familiar footsteps in the garage. Britney waddled over, 8 months pregnant and glowing despite the Iowa summer heat. "Mom says dinner's ready," she said, settling carefully into a chair. "Give me 5 minutes," I said, tightening the last bolt. Emma bounced into the garage, her hair growing back in soft curls after finishing chemotherapy. The doctor said she was in complete remission. Our little fighter had beaten cancer. "Dad, can you teach me how to change oil?" Emma asked. "Sure thing, sweetheart. This weekend." Britney watched us with a soft smile. "I want to learn too. For when the baby's older." "It's never too late to learn," I told her. The legal troubles were behind us. Harold had been true to his word, paying off Rebecca and covering all of Emma's medical expenses. The shop was thriving again, with customers who'd waited months for me to get back on my feet. Britney had enrolled in community college, planning to study business management. She wanted to help run Thompson's Classic Auto someday, maybe expand into custom restoration work. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, watching me clean my hands. "For everything. For choosing money over family. For not being here when Emma needed me. For saying you weren't worth calling Dad." I looked at this young woman who was about to make me a grandfather, who'd learned the hardest way possible that love wasn't measured in dollars. "We're family," I said. "Family forgives. Even after everything I put you through. Especially then." That evening, sitting around our dinner table with Linda, Emma, and Britney, I realized something profound. This was what I've been fighting for all along. Not the perfect family, but the real one. Messy, complicated, full of mistakes and forgiveness and second chances. Emma was telling us about her science project when Britney suddenly grabbed my hand. "The baby's kicking," she said, placing my palm on her belly. I felt the strong, steady movement of new life, and my eyes filled with tears. This little person would grow up knowing what it meant to have a grandfather who showed up, who stayed, who never gave up on family. "What are you going to name him?" Emma asked. "Her," Britney corrected. "And I'm thinking about Emma. After the strongest person I know." Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Really? But I might call her M for short, so we don't get confused." Linda squeezed my hand under the table. Outside, the Iowa summer evening was perfect. Warm breeze, fireflies started dance, the sound of kids playing in neighboring yards. This was enough. This was everything. Sometimes the best families aren't born. They're built, one choice at a time, one forgiveness at a time, one day of showing up at a time. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they come home.